Born without hands or forefeet, Morgan Perrin is not only a unique alpine skier, but also an inspiration to his friends and family. Once ranked 15th in the world, the Paralympian downhill skier is now a development coach for the BC Para-Alpine program. At age 10, Perrin had an accident causing a major brain injury. His parents, Sandy and Chris, worried he would not reach his full potential. Perrin's strength was greater than anyone had anticipated.
Our team doctor's like, well, do you want to race? I'm like, of course I'm going to race.
To watch Morgan ski is just like, you would never know that he's an amputee when you watch him come down a mountain.
I would take my brain that I had before that over everything else. That's for sure. I just got her done on that race day, and I was like, well, top half in the world, that'll do.
When you think about it, of all the things that he faced, the fact that he made it to that level and made it to the Olympic level is, when you think back on it, it's pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're pretty proud of him.
No hands, no feet, no problem. This is the mantra that Paralympian and para-alpine skier Morgan Perrin lives by. He competed in the Paralympics in 2010, but he may never have made it without the support of loving parents Sandy and Chris and a great World Cup team. Perrin's path would not be a smooth one. In the early days, there were some bumps in the road.
And I was an awful skier, let me tell you. Like, I was leaning back, I had no forward pressure in the boot, I was leaning back, technically I was absolutely awful.
Perrin was born without hands or forefeet. This made it challenging for him to ski. When he was 12, Perrin tried snowboarding.
It was a hassle at that time having ski poles for me. And so I'd be like, well, if I don't have to bring poles, that's way better than I'll go snowboarding, and that'll be that. So I did. And I crashed on my first run.
In order to avoid a ski school, he had an ice ball, flipped him forward, and because he has no hands, it literally, the stress went right up, and he fractured his shoulder.
It's like, ugh, sucks. All right, enough of that. And then I think the following Christmas, my parents had bought me a pair of skis for Christmas. So then I started skiing again.
By the age of 18, Perrin was on the Canadian World Cup para-alpine team. Downhill skiing is not a safe sport by any means. Perrin has had many crashes along the way.
I had a hard time sitting at the bottom of a run and just waiting for him to come down because I knew he was taking a rough line and I knew it was going to be risky and the chances of him crashing were pretty high. So sometimes I just didn't really want to be there.
He's one of these kids that has gone through so much in his life that these are bumps, but they're nowhere near the bumps these actually had to dig himself out of before.
I cracked my head open from one ear to the other when I was 10 years old and run over by a car. Went down an alleyway and across the street and into another alleyway. And then as I went across the street, there's a car coming.
After the accident, Perrin was in a coma for about a week.
Walked into grade 6, still semi-comatose, and it was pretty brutal for him. It was like he had tutors. He spent every summer with tutors.
Reading and writing were next to impossible. He had just been accepted into a private school, and the academic demand was high.
I've never had to work so hard for everything to get through that from grade 6 to grade 12, I guess.
The biggest challenge that he was able to overcome, but is a lifelong issue, was the head injury.
It definitely carved a bit of a path for me, and that was really important. And I'm not sure that would have happened if I hadn't been in that accident. I would take my brain that I had before that over everything else. That's for sure. Learning things it will always be a challenge for me, probably. And that was one of the loves I had for ski racing, was that you don't have to remember a chart or a poem or something like that. It's like it was up to you to figure out your own line and your own tactics and stuff. And you had coaches to suggest things to you and help you along the way. But when you're in the start, they're not there to help you. It's all you, and it was sort of created a sense of independence, which was really nice after being in an accident like that, because there's always people trying to help you and nurse you along pretty much back to health. And when you're in that start gate, there's no one else other than you, and if it was like a complete sense of freedom.
That year, Christmas was tough on the whole family.
Like after I got run over by that car, I kind of had to relearn everything anyways. Like I didn't even know what Christmas was. I asked my parents why lights were on people's houses. Like, what are we? Why are there lights on these houses? And they're like, oh, it's Christmas. I'm like, what are you talking about? Doctors came up to my parents and told them that I would be lucky to make it through the night, but I'd never walk again. So clearly I walked again.
It would be 2 years until Perrin was back on the snow, but his battle was twofold. The physical.
There's nobody else in the world that has the kind of congenital amputations that he has for competitive skiing.
And the mental.
At that time, he couldn't remember, so he would do course inspection and it would be like hitting a delete button, it was gone. He was on top of, in Chile, on top of the mountain, and the coaches were trying to get him to change something he was doing. And he said, I got to the top and I wanted to throw my skis right off the top of the mountain, and he said, I was almost going to say, I'm done, because he said he couldn't get it. The translation from his brain to his legs, it wasn't working.
At this point in Perrin's career, his prosthetics weren't keeping up with him.
They felt I was athletically more gifted than the prosthetics would provide me. So that every year they were trying to make it more so I can really showcase what I can do.
Ultimately, Perrin wasn't getting the results his coaches wanted. They decided his competitive racing days were over.
So like they didn't feel as though that I would be a medal contender or competitive. So they kind of just told me like, yo man, it doesn't make sense. I'm like, all right. And I wasn't happy to hear that by any means, but I understood.
In that way, I was relieved that it came to an end, because he knew in his heart that he wasn't skiing the way he wanted to do. And Morgan is one person that doesn't do things unless it really comes from his heart.
Now, with a successful skiing career behind him, Perrin uses his experience to coach the next generation of Olympic hopeful para-alpine skiers.
Yeah, I just love to coach. I just want them to get there. It's certainly rewarding as you see them get better.
That will be his greatest pleasure, is to give somebody else the pleasure he has of being on the mountain.
But sometimes it's hard for me, because I need to remember that they're only 13 and 14 and that they're not World Cup athletes. And sometimes I forget that, and I'm harder on them than they need to be probably. But it's only because I want them to be better, and I think that they can be. And I want them to understand that they can get to where I was, they just gotta work.